All right, welcome to this rubber stamp show and tell. We have Rubber Stampers World, Volume 1, Issue 6, April, May 1994. 1994, I'd consider the first kind of year of Stampscapes. I was selling Stampscape stamps in 1993, but it was a situation where plates cost a lot, and they always have magnesium plates for making the molds, what you make your stamps from. And what I would do is I would get a new plate in and I would make up the stamps from that plate in wood mounted form. And I was going around teaching, and I was getting some orders for them, but I didn't really have a catalog because I didn't have the entire line out. I'm talking about 1993. And I would reinvest all of that money, not back into more rubber from those plates, existing plates, but I would get a new plate made or two or something like that. So when I had enough stamps, I thought for my first catalog, I issued a catalog, and 1994 was really the first year where I was in kind of a full operation with an existing line of rubber stamps. I don't remember how many there were. I don't know if I had 100 or if it was less than that, but I don't know. It was a pretty significant year for me. All right, so the Rubber Stampers World magazine, it was you know, self-published magazine by this publisher. Let me see, it was $4 right here. So they had that staple right here. I'm not sure at the time if you can get this kind of run off at a at a copy store like a Kinko's Copies or something like that in this type of format. You might have been able to. So they have a little bit of a heavier stock on the cover here, and that's printed some way or copied some way. And what they did was, it was pretty cool. This is like glitter embossing on this blue area right here. And how they did that, I'm not quite sure. It almost looks like this is screened, like silk screened on here. And while the ink was wet, they applied some glitter embossing to it or something like that. Even though it's not terribly raised, though, so I'm not quite sure how they did it, but that's a lot of work to do something like this, and they had to do distribution and things like that. It was probably like a couple people operation or one person doing it all. So this would have been published at a time when, let me see, Rubber Stamp Madness and National Stampographic were in operation. I'm not quite sure if Vamp Stamp News was running in 94. I think they probably were, though. And there was this one here. So they probably sent me a couple copies of it to see if I was interested in advertising. I never did, because I was already advertising in Rubber Stamp Madness, and I didn't really branch out too much beyond that unless I was in this kind of co-op in these other magazines. But anyways, I wanted to show this magazine here because it had some of the show advertisements in here that were pretty significant for me. They had so the San Diego Heirloom Convention productions, Heirloom Productions conventions. These were some really early on ones right here. So you had the New England one. It was in Boston. Okay, now they changed that to South. Oh, I can't remember the name of the city, but they changed. I don't think they had a Boston show anymore. So they switched it to a different city, and I think that's kind of where it's still going on today. Or I don't know who's putting it on now. Heirloom Productions, the original coordinators for that retired not too long ago, and they sold off their existing shows, usually to regional manufacturers or retailers, I believe. Okay, but here, you had that one right here. I never went to that one, but I went to that other Massachusetts convention, and that was in our circuit for a few years. Okay, but the San Diego convention one was in the Del Mar Fairgrounds. Now, I didn't do the September 24th and 25th show in 1994, but we went to the inaugural one in 1993. And I believe that was my first rubber stamp convention as Stampscapes, as an independent. I don't think I did any of the Carson shows because I seem to remember getting ready for this show right here. And um, that was, yeah, I believe that was our first show, September 1993. Okay, but here's this other one right here. Seattle Tacoma area. That was at the in Puyallup at the Puyallup Western Washington Fairgrounds, and that was a show June 11th and 12th. That was kind of on our our circuit from then on, but that was the first show that they put on up there, and they put us right out in front, like pole position in the convention center. And I drove up to this one from Southern California. I picked up my dad in Central California, and because he had been retired at that point in time, not too long, but he had never done. I needed someone to help out at the shows and or out at a show, and he was going to work the register for me. He had never done any type of retail before or anything like that. He was an engineer, so he'd never done anything like work to register, make change, or anything like that. And so I really threw him into the fire with this one because this show right here, going way back, to 1994, I think that was one of the first shows around in that area. There might have been other shows before, but this one was a really big one. There were quite a few retailers of stamps just in that general area by this point in time. They were popping up very quickly at this point in time, and there was a big demand for things like a convention, an event up there, and this show was absolutely swamped, and my dad was just inundated. I was demonstrating and he was working the register. And it was a 2 day show and we practically sold out by noon that first day. And I think did it open at 9 or 10? Yeah, it opened at 10. And man, we were cleaned out pretty well by noon or something like that. It was crazy. My dad was like frantically working. We didn't have enough change. So he had to go get that from the coordinators, for, cash sales. And I don't know if, okay, at that point in time, we weren't taking credit cards. So that would have been like a whole other thing if we were doing that. But I know we were swamped, and there were questions like from people that were coming up from the Oregon area drove up to that show because there weren't any conventions in the Oregon area. So that was the closest one at the time. So he was getting questions like, hey, we're from Oregon. Do we have to pay sales tax or something like that? And, so I don't know. My dad was pretty frazzled, but he did a great job. And I don't know that I always remember that part of it. But that was our biggest show ever that we've ever done. And I don't know. I remember just having a great time at that one. But and I had a bunch of relatives up there too. That's why my dad kind of went to it. Like all of his side of the family was up there, or a lot of it back then. So we were able to do some visiting up there. And I think my sister flew up there too, and she helped out at that show. Anyways, family affair there. A lot of people thought, or I don't know, but a lot of people thought, but they thought that, okay, so there wasn't like the internet back then, but they thought that, okay, that was me. Kevin was working to register, and they said, oh, and his son is demonstrating. So that was pretty funny. So I was like, I don't know, like 24 or 25 years old at the time, but I probably looked like I was, all right, 20 or so. I don't know, whatever. But I don't know. I heard that going around. Okay, so let's see. Letters from the editor. Janet Norton, right here, was the publisher of this magazine. I noticed, okay, so I've already flipped through this, but I noticed there was like some poetry on here And let's see, Hippo Heart right here. That was a store in the Bay Area of California. So maybe they contributed here. Okay, so here's something that I find interesting right here. So the Stamp Art Gallery in San Francisco, and it was put on by Picasso and his wife Darlene of Stamp Francisco, Picasso Gagliani. By the way, this little side thing is check out the Rubber Stamp Museum video here on YouTube. It's pretty cool. Someone probably took a VHS camcorder and just kind of followed him around his little museum for rubber stamps, and he had like all kinds of interesting, whatever, historical rubber stamps that he'd probably collected, combing it, through, like antique stores and, thrift stores and things like that. But just some really interesting stuff. And I need to interview him sometime, or both of them, about the history of, you know, kind of the hobby of rubber stamping. We don't need to go back into like historical things like with, who invented the rubber stamp or something like that in business purposes. But I don't know, he can probably, give us a whole rundown of the entire kind of the beginnings and the arc of, rubber stamping and so on and so forth. But anyways, I remember seeing stories of their stamp art gallery in San Francisco. I think there was photographs in Rubber Stamp Madness on that gallery. So I always thought that was pretty cool. And that was probably pre, 1994. Okay, VIP rubber stamps right here. I think it was short for visual image printery, I think. It doesn't say in here, I don't think, but so Jim was the artist of their line, and he was in business with this guy named Terry, but they were right next to us at the Carson Rubber Stamp Convention for many, many years. Some of us volunteered to go out to this, I think it was the North Wing or something like that, North Hall or something like that. So it was Carson was this main it wasn't a convention center, it's this community center, so there's this big hall that can be separated up like three ways, and that was the main hall, and then they expanded out into this garden area in front of that main hall. Then there was a lot of space in that garden area, but then the Carson convention got so big that they started opening up these other wings, okay, with like multiple entrances to get into the show. And I think that North Hall was one of the last areas to open up. Then they started opening up doors that went out into the courtyards of these North Halls and everything like that. It was insane. But we were in that one hall together with Printworks, if you know them, and Darcy's Country Collectibles. Well, I don't know. It's just Darcy's had one big room, private room there practically, or it was like a private room in that North Hall. But VIP was right next to us, so I'd see them all the time, and they had a really professional looking booth. I think it was like illuminated rolling cards or something like that with the stamps on them, I think. And Jim would always be demonstrating there. And Terry left the business at some point in time, and it was just Jim, and he ran it for a few more years after that. But always good. It was always good to see them, and they were based out of Anaheim, I believe. I believe there's another ad in the back here, but it looks like he graduated from Cal State Fullerton in art and minor in physical anthropology. So Fullerton's pretty close to the college that I went to in Long Beach. I went to Long Beach State and Cal State Fullerton. They're both Cal State colleges. A friend of mine was teaching an illustration class over at Fullerton last semester. Look at this here. Basic embossing techniques, okay? So when you get people that got into rubber stamping in the early 90s, I don't know about the 80s, maybe, but the technique that got most of them into stamping was embossing. That was a big, big technique back then. And when people saw that embossing, it's like, oh my God, I got to do that. These raised, kind of usually metallic, raised types of things were really cool to be able to do. Previously, probably, people probably saw that on business cards or something like that, like professionally done. But I don't know, embossing was a big one. If you ask people like through the late 90s, maybe 2000 or something like that, how'd you get into stamping? Or what made you get into stamping? It was embossing. And I would typically ask that, in my workshops when I was traveling around the country just to shoot the breeze. I was kind of curious how people got into, kind of a niche hobby at the time, especially, in those earlier 90s. When you got to around 2000, 2000, maybe after that, people, if you talk to someone, they might know or have heard of someone that does rubber stamping, via Stampin' Up! Parties or something like that. But at least people had heard about the hobby. Before then, it was like, what do you do? I make rubber stamps, or you rubber stamp. They're thinking of rubber stamp like business, types of operations. I'm looking right here, and there's this foiled glue, types of applications here. So I got into foiling techniques not when I was in stamping, but when I was in art school, and just at a chance. I didn't do it on any of my projects, but I went to these tools of the trade shows in Pasadena where it was the art industry. But this one guy, I think it was called Edwards Foil Graphics, you had those rolls of things, and then you would apply some, type of thing, adhesive, and then you take those foil rolls and you stick it to it and, raise it up like that. And it would apply the foil on there. So that was kind of cool. Oh, so look at this right here. So here's the Stamp Art Gallery right here. And they had a different exhibition for each month right here. So there's a lot of mail art. Male artisans were a big part of the stamping industry, and the original, one big group of users back in the day. It's where you're stamping your envelopes and mailing it to someone. And the envelope was the big thing. That was the art, was the envelope. So I don't know if they were including letters or things like that in there, but yeah. Stamp Ink right here. That's in Santa Maria, California. That's a city that was really close to where I grew up. If you needed to go find something or get something that wasn't in a town of 20,000 in Lompoc, California, you went to Santa Maria pretty much. That's where the bigger stores were, the shopping mall, things like that. Art Decal gives you the edge. So Decal Edge scissors, I guess, coming out at the time, probably. A new development in, the card making community at the time. I don't know if people, you didn't hear, you heard rubber stamping mostly. You didn't really hear so much, like as someone said, what do you do if you used rubber stamps or something like that? You would typically say that you were a stamper back then. These days, it's more of like card making or something like that. When things kind of moved along more towards the 2000s and things like that, then it became kind of more of the paper arts, and that included rubber stamping, scrapbooking, card making, that type of thing, all encompassing. But yeah, so the decal edge scissors. I don't remember when I saw those first. Stamp your art out. Art Decal gives you the edge. Design a card. It looks like there's some. Is this a decal edged ruler right here? Huh. It looks like a ruler. I don't know if you know anything about Art Decal. No, I'm not going to read through this whole thing, but stamps and stuff in Estes Park, Colorado. So I see a lot of these stores here. A lot of these stores carried Stampscape stamps. Sorry, no wholesale. Oh, they had their own line here. I think they were a store too. Yeah, front, one, 1115 Front Street. Oh, that was in Sacramento, California. And then Riverside Drive, Estes Park. I don't remember now. Too Much Fun, Rubber Stamps, Pele's, Davenport. Art Stamp and Stencil Dealers Association, San Francisco show. That was a group of uh, manufacturers and retailers, okay, where you can go to a show that was just wholesale, okay, and they would put these shows on in different areas. So, if you were a manufacturer, you would go to that show. You wouldn't necessarily have to take a lot of inventory unless you got a pre-sale, like, hey, some store is going to be there. We want to order these stamps, okay, and then you can take it there. But basically, it was just to take wholesale orders, okay, because if you went to a show back then, like a retailer, it would be really hard to get the manufacturer kind of one-on-one to talk about things, just because those shows were so swamped, during the retail show hours, to take a special order or something like that from them. So these types of shows right here, it wouldn't have like, there wouldn't be like 40 different manufacturers there with, I don't know, whatever, dozens and dozens of retailers, I don't think. But they can go there and, talk in a more kind of relaxed environment. Some of the shows, like Carson used to have, you could have a separate booth or table, in a different part of the convention center. I remember, where a retailer can go up there and place their orders with the manufacturer or whoever was representing them there. And I don't know. Yeah, that went on like once or twice, I think. Okay, so Stamp in the Hand Company, that was a company that I used to work for. Let me see, they have new foam back sets. Okay, I didn't read that there, but I remember this alphabet set here. There was only one alphabet set from a Stamp in the Hand, so they started doing foam back ones. I don't remember doing that. That was after I left, because, by this time I was already doing Stampscapes independently. But I used to go over there periodically, because I would still be, helping them sell my stamps, the nature stamps that I created for their line. At one point in time, they just completely discontinued all of them. That's when I brought in a lot of my previous previously designed nature stamps, and they're all in the nature sets number 1 through 4. Those are a lot of the Stamp in the Hand design stamps that I did for them. These little boxes right here. So these boxes right here, I don't know if that was a die cut here. I'm sure it says it in here, but some of these types of things like boxes or envelopes, it was actually a rubber stamp template. So you'd stamp out like this big stamp, and it would have the lines and the cut lines in it, and it would show you, or, like a dotted fold line or something like that, to make these types of things. And I'm not quite sure what it was, but look at this right here. So, I mean, there are halftone types of images in this magazine, this publication right here. This is a halftone right here, so it's a photograph, and they have to translate it into little dots. But for this little diagram right here, this is someone having to draw this, so that it's already in line art, in a line art format, So this is a lot of work going into this right here. Oh, this right here I'm talking about. I guess these ones right here are actual designs. And I guess what you do is on the different panels right here, so you make these panels and then you stamp that into the panel, I guess. And like I said, I'm not going to read all this, but okay, so here's the Scottsdale Scottsdale rubber art stampede. Okay, Safari Resort Convention Complex, Scottsdale, Arizona. All right, so I did that show twice, I think. I think I did this inaugural one. So this is June 18th, 1994. And I remember driving out to that one with this coworker of mine who happened to be my neighbor from my hometown, but he ended up going to Long Beach State after getting out of the Navy. So we did this inaugural show here at that event convention center. But I remember the convention center. It was like one of those places that the hotel complex next to it or whatever, or that was a part of it, looked like it was probably hopping like in the 60s or something like that. I remember my room door was this sliding glass door, and I couldn't get it to lock, which I don't know. It's like, when you're in like a hotel or something like that, you have this, this sliding, glass door that just like is wide open, to this whatever, this courtyard out there, and it doesn't latch, because that lock was probably from the 60s still, and that's what it looked like to me. Didn't latch, but it's funny the types of things that you remember. But we just did that show once, and then I went back to it years later. It was probably, so this is 1994, and I probably went back to it around 2000 and, oh, I don't know, maybe it was like 2002, maybe, I think we did that show again. Um, but yeah, I don't know if that one, I don't know how long that still went on. I don't think it's going on anymore. Circus Stamps right here. This is a company that had a line of these circus stamps, circus-based stamps, clowns, performing animals, things like that. And he was the one that was making my rubber. They call it vulcanizing your, pressing your rubber. And that was something that I never really wanted to do from a manufacturing standpoint. I could have saved a lot of money, but, it was just, I would have had someone on that at all times. You have to have this, I would have had to have someone trained to do that. Um, and then sometimes you got bad rubber in, you got bubbles in it and things like that. I just thought, okay, I'm just going to farm out that production. And that's something that I still do. Stamping on pots here. Now, the thing about this, when I flipped through this, that was kind of interesting was at this point in time, okay, no one's using unmounted rubber for rubber stamps, okay? If you bought an unmounted die, which is an unmounted, piece of rubber stamp, clear stamps aren't around at the time either, okay? But if you bought a rubber stamp like this, or an unmounted one, you mount it up pretty much on a piece of wood, okay? So they're doing this thing on this pot right here, and they're taking this, and in this case, it's like a ceramic mug or something like that, and they're doing their impression like this onto it, which is probably, I don't know, it's pretty crazy, but they did a really great job with it. They probably did it in, I don't know what type of ink they're using on there, but okay, so it's an oil-based stamping ink. So is that, I'm guessing that was um, a, a, a pigment ink, something like maybe the Clear Snap ones or something like that. Painter acrylic oil, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not going to go into it, but breadcloth project, pretty cool. But anyways, this is what these types of magazines were good for. Certain magazines concentrated on kind of a little bit of a different presentation. So Vamp Stamp News, and it looks like this one here, they were heavily technique based, which is what a lot of people wanted to see, you know what I mean? Some different types of magazines showed different types of examples of your projects, envelopes, etc. And like Rubber Stamp Madness, I don't remember it going into so many of the things like mugs and fabrics and, things like that we've seen on here. I mean, some, but this one's like all about techniques right here. And this is pre-internet and everything like that. So you couldn't really see, step-by-step types of instructional things, except for in these types of publications, if you didn't have like a local store or convention that you went to where you could see these things done. And like I said, people weren't walking around with like things like camcorders. These days, if you wanted to, go to a rubber stamp convention and record something that, demonstration that someone's doing, provided that they're cool with it. You can remember, how to do something. You just play back your video or something like that. But like even like digital photography wasn't being done at this point in time. So, yeah, it's publications were where it's at, in order to learn these types of things like this. Hippo Heart here. Like I said, I taught at a class there. They made their own stamps as well, but that was a store there. There's rubber stamp art stamps. They're VIP with Jim. Here's the classifieds. Classifieds right here. 3 things, I guess. Imagine Air Designs, always had a lot of respect for them. Recently, someone was looking for hot air balloons, and I said, "Well, Imagine Air, I remember had a lot of them. I don't have any right now, but someone wants me to design some. But Imagine Air had some really good ones, really detail-oriented designs, really good stuff. Look at this right here. So the rubber stamp organizer display case, and it looks like there's wood-mounted stamps. It probably had these, the depth of the stamp that you need, and then it looks like there's like pads and different accessories in another drawer. And it looks like this, from the look of this photograph, right, you probably just stack these, and it probably stacks, you know, perfectly on there. It's not like a drawer system or something like that. I'm guessing, I don't know. This is by Exquisite Images right here. So back in the day of wood-mounted stamps, we're talking about specialized furniture a lot of times. Rubber stamping, what do you call it, attachers or something like that. And if anyone ever found like some sort of like flat files available, some companies going out of business, architectural firm or something like that. That was like the greatest finds of all time were flat files, these rolling, very sturdy flat files that you can put all your stamps in. Okay, so coming events, Rubberama in San Jose. We used to do that show once or twice a year. I started doing it, I think, once a year instead of twice a year, but we would typically do that around Halloween. Sometimes it was on Halloween. Looks like there was one in April 16th. So it was probably in April then and October. October, it was always cool to do a show kind of close to or around Halloween because a lot of the booths would be kind of decorated for Halloween. You have the Rubber Stamp Roundup right here in Las Vegas. That might have been the inaugural one, and it was put on by Stamp Oasis, which was the first rubber stamp store in Las Vegas. And we did it kind of, for a lot of the manufacturers did a lot of the different shows out there, but sometimes if it was a show in an area where they felt like just kind of having a little mini vacation, that they can write off, the travel expenses to the hotel and things like that, they would do the show there. So, the Las Vegas show would be one of those that would be classified as one of those kind of, retreats kind of for the, the vendors as well. But we did that show, the inaugural one here, which is pretty cool to do. I think it was at the Las Vegas Convention Center, I believe. And then it started going around to different hotels, but it was kind of pretty funny because Stamp Oasis hired like these lookalikes to come around to do, during the show. So that I think there was like an Elvis and a Marilyn Monroe walking around at the show, and then there was these like Las Vegas showgirls, with the full-on headdress and everything like that, walking around at the show. So it was kind of like, when you're sitting there, demonstrators or something like that, and in your booth, I'm talking about me, and then you look up and there's like this showgirl there or something like that. It was kind of like, it was like shocking, to see that, or look up and then you see like, here's like Marilyn Monroe, look-alike, standing there. It was, I don't know, it was an interesting dynamic. Puyallup show, the Scottsdale show. So a lot of the first types of things. So there was the first rubber stamp, conventions happening, and then we did a lot of them. So first time doing a show out in Las Vegas. I might have done the San Jose. I probably did that San Jose show there. That was probably the first San Jose show that I did. And I remember. Okay, so that was in April 1994. I think I got this friend of mine that was. I don't think he was currently working at the time, or I don't know, he was doing something, but he was able to help me out at that show. And I think he had a brother up that way too, that lived up that way, so they helped me out at that show. Where doing the register and things like that. So, um, yeah. Scottsdale, Stampaway, USA. So that was a show that happened in August, and it was a Friday and Saturday show. And I think at that time it was just Saturday. I don't think there was a preview night at that point in time, but they had workshops being taught at the hotel, the host hotel, I believe, and probably over at the store that hosted that convention. But that Cincinnati show was always a fantastic show because it was more than just a convention. It was more like a full event. I think there were demonstrations by vendors and classes being taught. I thought it might not have been at this one, which might have been the inaugural show there, but they started doing things like from a Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, out there. It was never on Sundays, but there were workshops and demonstrations, in-store demonstrations being done. So there was a lot of workshops being happening out there. And then the show was on Saturdays. But what they started doing was on the Friday nights before the shows, they started having these advanced preview sales and kind of like costume type of or themed parties at that. So people can dress up. A lot of it was vendors dressing up. We never dressed up like that. So that, a theme might be the Roaring Twenties or something like that. And you can dress up your booth or something like that, or you can dress in costume or something of that sort for that Friday night. And then for about, I don't know, like 3 hours or something like that, people could shop. So a lot of people got their shopping done at that night because there were less people. I think they sold a certain number of tickets to that. They might still be doing that. I'm not sure. But the that show right there, that was the first show I think that was in the entire Midwest area. So it wasn't uncommon for people to be driving. You talk to people and they'd be driving down from Canada to go to that. But you know, not uncommon for people to do like a 10, 12 hour drive to this show here. And they were never flying, it was always driving, it seemed, to everyone that we talked to about that show out there. So that was always a good one, though, because it was almost like more like a retreat. So if anyone's coming in for the show, I'm guessing they were probably coming in for those. For the workshops and demonstrations and things like that, and getting there at least by Thursday so that they'd have the full day on Friday to partake in all those different events like that. And so for this show right here, this was one of the few shows too that after the shows, the coordinator for Stampaway would have like a little party at her house for vendors that night. And so sometimes you can go out there, and sometimes we were just too tired or something like that. But I think we went to quite a few of them. But sometimes that's like the time when you would talk to other vendors, and other people just in the industry, where you just don't really have a chance to do that. When you're setting up your booth, you're in and out, you're trying to get that done. It's taken hours to do, and then, you might have a little bit of chance to, just a little chit chat before a show opens or something like that. But oftentimes, you're getting stuff ready, you're pricing things, and then after a show ends, you're really trying to take you down your booth really quickly and get your stuff out of there. Some people are leaving town and they head back that night to wherever they're from. Sometimes I was getting on flights after shows, things like that. So you just didn't have a chance to talk with other vendors a lot of times. But because there wasn't a Sunday um, show day, it allowed vendors to just kind of unwind. And it's like we're all done with shipping all of our stuff, our booths all packed up and things like that. So sometimes that was pretty cool to to chat with other vendors and just talk about things, how things are going, the industry, etc. Stampomania here in Folsom, California. I taught a class out there twice, or classes out there a couple times. First time I taught was in their store. I don't know if they moved locations or something like that, but the second time I went out there to teach, they had this other room it was like in this historical little area of Folsom, and with a lot of antique stores and things like that. So one time I was teaching a class, and my class was based around this stamp called the tonal applicator. It was like this pear-shaped design with a bunch of dots. Okay, it was just made out of dots. So these days I just apply my tone, wadded up paper towels or something like that. But back then, I was doing it with this stamp called the tonal applicator. So you would apply tone like this. You'd color your stamp up, and then you would be adding in your tone like this. So it's adding a bunch of dots down. And, if you have a class like 12, 15 people or something like that, and they're doing this, and sometimes they start doing it like this, so you can imagine that times 15 or something like that. But in Folsom, when we were doing this in this upstairs kind of area. I don't know if it was their warehouse area or whatever, or if they rented it out separately or something like that. But when we got to doing that, this guy came up and he knocked on the door or just walked in or something like that of this room, and he said, "Hey, what's happening here? I got a store down down underneath here, and like everything's rattling. I got all this hammering done up there, so it's like." Oh my God, sorry about that. And I was thinking, okay, how do we do this? I've got, more classes to teach throughout the day. So I just said, hey, everyone, when you're applying your tone, just do it like that. So that was, I always remember that moment, in that workshop right there. But that was right there in Stampomania. Anyway, so subscription application right here. This company was out of Placerville. I wonder. Okay, so I wonder if this company right here was. So this is Wildlife Enterprises right here. Okay, so they were the ones. I think. So this is Wildlife Way, Placerville, California. Broadway, Placerville. I wonder if this is the Wildlife Enterprises were the ones to put out this publication here. I'm guessing it was because they got this full page, type of thing right here in the back. But it probably was. So, anyways, just a really cool magazine. And these types of things definitely filled a niche, in terms of those additional types of things that Rubber Stamp Madness and National Stampographic, didn't cover. There was Vamp Stamp News out there, and like I said, and back in the day, you almost couldn't get enough of these types of publications if there was some kind of technique, especially that you wanted to learn about. That wasn't just available at the click of a button, online with YouTube or people's private websites. What do you call it? I can't even think of it right now. Where people, could post all these different types of techniques on online there. I can't think of the word. What is that thing where you have your own private web page. Anyways, my mind's blank. So Rubber Stampers World, just a little show and tell. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you on the next live stream or show and tell.